Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Rogue, Jean Grey and Kitty Pryde. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, so without wasting any time let's get into the video. Naruto Uzumaki was used to the unexpected. After all, he was the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox, a ninja who had faced countless battles, and a hero who had saved his world from destruction more than once. But nothing could have prepared him for the strange futuristic world he now found himself in. He had been training in the forest outside Konoha when it happened. One moment, he was practicing a new jutsu, and the next, a swirling vortex of energy opened up in front of him, pulling him in before he could react. When he regained consciousness, he was lying on a grassy hillside, with an unfamiliar cityscape spread out below him. Naruto stood up slowly, rubbing his head as he took in his surroundings. The city was unlike anything he had ever seen. Tall buildings made of glass and metal reached towards the sky, and strange vehicles moved along the streets below. It reminded him a little of the Hidden Rain village, but on a much grander scale. "Where am I?" Naruto muttered to himself, taking a step forward. This definitely isn't Konoha. Before he could take another step, Naruto felt a presence behind him. His instincts kicked in, and he spun around, kunai in hand, ready to defend himself. But what he saw made him pause. Three figures stood a short distance away, watching him with a mix of curiosity and caution. The first was a girl with long flowing red hair and piercing green eyes. She wore a yellow and black uniform that clung to her athletic frame, and her expression was calm but focused. The second was a taller girl with dark hair and a strikingly pale complexion. She wore a black leather jacket and gloves, and her eyes were hidden behind a pair of dark sunglasses. Despite her tough appearance, there was something vulnerable in the way she held herself. The third figure was a shorter girl with shoulder-length brown hair and a mischievous grin on her face. She was dressed in a more casual outfit, with a simple blue top and jeans, and she seemed less wary than the other two. "Who are you?" Naruto demanded, his voice steady despite the confusion swirling in his mind. "And where am I?" The red-haired girl stepped forward, raising her hands in a gesture of peace. "It's okay, we're not here to hurt you," she said, her voice gentle. "I'm Jean Grey, and these are my friends, Rogue and Kitty Pryde. We're mutants." Naruto blinked in surprise. "Mutants?" Kitty, the girl with the playful grin, nodded. "Yeah, we're kind of like superheroes, but with powers we were born with. You're not from around here, are you?" Naruto shook his head slowly, still trying to process what was happening. "No, I'm not. I'm a ninja from the Hidden Leaf Village, but I don't know how I ended up here." Jean exchanged a glance with Rogue, who frowned slightly before stepping forward. "You've got power, sugar. We can feel it. Whatever brought you here, it wasn't by accident." Naruto felt a surge of energy from the nine tails within him, and he knew they were right. His arrival in this world wasn't a coincidence, there was something bigger at play. But what? Kitty phased her hand through a nearby tree trunk, making Naruto's eyes widen in surprise. "You've got some pretty cool moves," she said with a wink. "But don't worry, we can help you figure things out. You're not alone." Naruto's tension eased slightly at her words. He wasn't sure what to make of this new world or the people in it, but he knew one thing. He had to find a way back home. And maybe, just maybe, these mutants could help him do that. "Thanks," Naruto said, lowering his kunai. "I appreciate it." Jean smiled warmly. "Come on, we'll take you to our school. Professor Xavier might be able to help you understand what brought you here." As Naruto followed Jean, Rogue, and Kitty down the hillside, he couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation. He had faced countless challenges in his life, but this was something entirely new, a world of mutants, heroes, and unknown dangers. And deep down, Naruto knew that his journey here was only just beginning. Naruto walked through the gates of the Xavier Institute for Gifted Youngsters, his eyes wide with curiosity. The mansion was huge, surrounded by sprawling gardens and training grounds. As they approached the entrance, a group of students, each displaying unique abilities, caught his attention. It was clear that this school was unlike anything he had ever seen. Jean led the way, explaining as they walked. "This is where we live and train. The professor started the school to help mutants learn to control their powers and use them for good." Naruto nodded, his gaze darting around as he took everything in. He was still trying to wrap his head around the idea of mutants, people born with powers similar to chakra abilities, but much more varied and unpredictable. In his world, such abilities were honed through rigorous training and discipline, but here, they seemed to be a natural part of who these people were. As they entered the mansion, they were greeted by a tall man in a wheelchair with a calm and wise demeanor. His presence was commanding yet comforting, and Naruto immediately felt a sense of respect for him. "Professor Xavier," Jean said with a smile. "This is Naruto Uzumaki. He's from another world." Xavier's eyebrows raised slightly, but his expression remained composed. "Welcome, Naruto. It's a pleasure to meet you." Jean has already informed me of your arrival, and I must say, it's quite extraordinary. Naruto scratched the back of his head, feeling a bit awkward. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure it all out myself. One minute I'm training, and the next, I'm here. The professor nodded thoughtfully. You possess a great deal of power, Naruto. I can sense it. Whatever brought you here, it must be connected to that power. But for now, you're welcome to stay with us as long as you need. Naruto smiled, relieved by the warm welcome. Thanks, I appreciate it. And if there's anything I can do to help, just let me know. Jean and the others showed Naruto around the mansion, introducing him to more of the students. He quickly realized that while the X-Men had extraordinary abilities, they were also just people each with their own struggles, hopes, and dreams. It reminded him of his friends back in Konoha. Later that day, Naruto joined the X-Men for a training session in the Danger Room, a massive simulation chamber that could create almost any environment or scenario for them to practice their skills. As they entered, Naruto couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. This was his chance to see what these mutants were capable of and to show them what a ninja could do. Alright, Naruto, Kitty said with a grin as she adjusted her gloves. Let's see what you've got. The simulation began, creating a dense forest filled with obstacles and hidden enemies. Jean, Rogue, and Kitty sprang into action, using their powers with precision and skill. Jean's telekinesis allowed her to manipulate objects and deflect attacks with ease, while Rogue's super strength and flight made her a formidable force in combat. Kitty phased through solid objects, making her nearly untouchable. Naruto watched them for a moment, impressed by their abilities, before joining in. He summoned his clones and darted through the forest with agility and speed, his kunai flying with deadly accuracy. The X-Men were quick to notice his prowess, and soon they were working together seamlessly, combining their strengths to overcome the simulation's challenges. By the end of the session, the group was sweaty and tired but also exhilarated. Naruto grinned as he wiped the sweat from his brow. You guys are pretty awesome. Kitty beamed. Right back at you, ninja boy. You're not too bad yourself. Rogue nodded in agreement, a small smile playing on her lips. Yeah, you've got some serious skills, sugar. Glad to have you on our side. Jean approached Naruto, her expression thoughtful. You're a natural leader, Naruto. It's easy to see why you've come so far in your world. But there's more to leadership than just strength, you also have to understand your team. Naruto nodded, appreciating her words. He had learned that lesson the hard way back in Konoha, and it was something he always kept in mind. I get that. Back home, my friends and I had to work together to face some pretty tough enemies. It's all about trusting each other and having each other's backs. Jean smiled warmly. Exactly. And I think you'll fit in just fine here. As the days passed, Naruto grew more accustomed to life at the Xavier Institute. He spent his time training with the X-Men, learning about their world, and bonding with Jean, Rogue, and Kitty. Each of them had their own unique charm, and Naruto found himself drawn to all three in different ways. Jean was calm and composed, with a quiet strength that reminded Naruto of Sakura. She had a deep understanding of others and always seemed to know the right thing to say. Rogue was more reserved, often keeping her distance due to her powers, but Naruto could see the kindness in her eyes and the pain she carried. Kitty was playful and carefree, bringing a lightness to their group that Naruto couldn't help but admire. As Naruto's relationships with the girls deepened, he began to feel a growing sense of attachment to this new world and the people in it. But even as he adapted to his new life, a nagging feeling in the back of his mind told him that something wasn't right. He couldn't shake the sense that his arrival in this world was connected to something much bigger, something that could threaten both his world and this one. And as much as he was starting to care for Jean, Rogue, and Kitty, Naruto knew that his mission was far from over. He had to find out what had brought him here and how to stop it before it was too late. Weeks passed, and Naruto's presence at the Xavier Institute became a normal part of daily life. He continued to train with the X-Men, learning more about their powers and how to work together as a team. His bonds with Jean, Rogue, and Kitty grew stronger, and he began to see them as more than just friends. They were becoming his family in this strange new world. However, the peace they had enjoyed was short-lived. One evening, during a routine training session, the mansion's alarms blared, signaling an emergency. The X-Men rushed to the command center, where Professor Xavier was already monitoring the situation. What's going on, Professor? Scott, also known as Cyclops, asked as he adjusted his visor. Xavier's expression was grave. We've detected an anomaly in the city, an energy signature unlike anything we've seen before. It's causing widespread disruptions, and I fear it may be a new mutant with powers we cannot yet comprehend. Naruto felt a chill run down his spine. He had encountered many powerful foes in his time, but something about this situation felt different, more dangerous. Whatever it is, we need to stop it, Wolverine growled, his claws extending with a metallic snick. Xavier nodded. Agreed. But be careful, this mutant's abilities are unknown, and we don't know what they're capable of. The X-Men prepared for battle, each of them focused and determined. Naruto, too, readied himself, feeling the familiar surge of chakra as he activated his Nine Tails power. He had a feeling that this fight would be unlike any other he had faced. As they arrived in the city, the scene was one of chaos. Buildings were crumbling, streets were torn apart, and civilians were fleeing in panic. In the midst of the destruction stood a figure cloaked in dark energy, their forms shifting and warping as if they were made of pure darkness. The X-Men spread out, surrounding the figure. Jean reached out with her telepathy, trying to make contact, but her face twisted in pain as she recoiled. "I can't, their mind is a void. There's nothing there." The figure turned towards them, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. "You cannot stop me," it hissed, its voice echoing with 100 different tones. "I am the void, the end of all things." Naruto's heart raced as he sensed the sheer power emanating from the void. This was no ordinary mutant, this was something far more dangerous. Wolverine charged forward, his claws slashing through the air, but the void merely raised a hand, and Wolverine was thrown back as if struck by an invisible force. Cyclops unleashed a blast of optic energy, but the void absorbed it, growing larger and more menacing with each passing second. "This isn't working," Storm said, her voice filled with concern. "Our attacks are only making it stronger." Naruto clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He couldn't let this thing destroy everything, it wasn't just about him anymore. He had people he cared about here, people he had to protect. "Let me try," Naruto said, stepping forward. He summoned his clones, each one charging at the void from different angles, their Rasengan glowing brightly. But as the clones closed in, the void unleashed a wave of dark energy that obliterated them in an instant. Naruto gritted his teeth, realizing that this enemy was unlike any he had ever faced. "We need to figure out its weakness," Rogue said, her voice tight with urgency. "There's gotta be something it can't do." Jean's eyes widened as she scanned the area. "Naruto, that energy, it's similar to the portal that brought you here. There's a connection between you and this void." Naruto's mind raced as he processed her words. If the void was connected to the portal that had brought him here, then perhaps he was the key to stopping it. He focused his chakra, reaching deep within himself to the power of the Nine Tails. As the energy surged through him, Naruto felt a strange resonance with the void, as if their energies were intertwined. "Everyone, stand back." Naruto shouted as he charged forward, his Rasengan glowing with the combined power of his chakra and the Nine Tails. He aimed directly at the void, pouring all of his strength into the attack. The void shrieked as the Rasengan connected, the dark energy swirling around them both. For a moment, it felt as though time had stopped, and then, with a blinding flash of light, the void shattered into fragments, dissipating into the air. Naruto collapsed to the ground, panting heavily. The X-Men rushed to his side, their expressions a mix of relief and concern. "You did it," Kitty said, her voice filled with awe. Naruto smiled weakly, feeling the exhaustion wash over him. "Yeah, but I think that was just the beginning." Jean knelt beside him, her hand gently resting on his shoulder. "You're right. Whatever that was, it's connected to something much larger. But we'll face it together." Naruto nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. He wasn't alone in this fight, he had the X-Men by his side, and together, they would protect both their worlds from whatever darkness lay ahead. After the intense battle with the void, the city was left in ruins, but thanks to the combined efforts of the X-Men and Naruto, the worst had been averted. The group returned to the Xavier Institute, each of them feeling the weight of the confrontation still hanging over them. Naruto was exhausted, both physically and mentally. The battle had taken a lot out of him, and as much as he tried to shake it off, he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that this was only the beginning. The void's ominous words echoed in his mind, filling him with unease. In the days that followed, the atmosphere at the mansion was tense. Professor Xavier had all of the X-Men on high alert, anticipating that the void's appearance was part of a larger, more sinister plot. Naruto threw himself into his training, pushing himself harder than ever before. He knew that he had to be ready for whatever was coming. One evening, after an intense session in the danger room, Naruto decided to take a break. He walked through the mansion's gardens, hoping to clear his mind. The night air was cool, and the stars shone brightly overhead, offering a moment of peace. As he wandered, he spotted Rogue sitting on a bench under a large oak tree, gazing up at the sky. Naruto hesitated for a moment before approaching her. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice gentle. Rogue looked up and smiled slightly, her usually guarded expression softening. "Sure, I could use the company." Naruto sat down beside her, the two of them sitting in comfortable silence for a while. Rogue's powers had always made it difficult for her to get close to others, and Naruto knew that she carried a lot of pain because of it. But he also sensed a kindness and strength in her that drew him to her. "After everything that's happened, it feels good to just sit here and relax," Naruto said, breaking the silence. "I've been so focused on training and preparing for whatever's coming that I almost forgot what it's like to just be." Rogue nodded, her gaze still fixed on the stars. Yeah, it's been a lot to take in. I've faced a lot of enemies, but that void, it was something else. And then there's you. You just showed up out of nowhere and now it feels like the world's turning upside down. Naruto chuckled softly. Trust me, I'm still trying to figure it all out myself. But I'm glad I ended up here. I've met some pretty amazing people. Rogue turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. You're different, Naruto. You're not like anyone I've ever met. You don't just have powers, you've got heart. And that's what makes you special. Naruto felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. He had always strived to protect those he cared about, to never give up no matter how tough things got. Hearing Rogue say that meant more to him than he could express. You're pretty special too, Rogue, Naruto said sincerely. You've been through a lot, but you keep going. You don't let anything break you. Rogue smiled, a real smile this time, and for a moment, the walls she had built around herself seemed to come down. Thanks, Naruto. That means a lot coming from you. They sat together for a while longer, just enjoying the quiet of the night. Eventually, Rogue leaned her head on Naruto's shoulder and he felt a surge of emotion as he realized how much he cared about her. He wanted to protect her, to be there for her in a way that no one else could. But just as Naruto was beginning to relax, he sensed something, a presence that was familiar yet different. His body tensed and Rogue noticed the change in him. What's wrong? She asked, her voice filled with concern. Naruto narrowed his eyes, scanning the area. I'm not sure. But something doesn't feel right. Before they could react, a bright flash of light appeared in the distance, followed by a powerful shockwave that rocked the ground beneath them. The sky lit up with strange, swirling energy, and Naruto knew immediately that it was connected to the void. We need to get back to the mansion, Naruto said urgently, grabbing Rogue's hand as they ran towards the building. By the time they reached the mansion, the rest of the X-Men were already gathered in the command center, monitoring the situation. The air was thick with tension as the screens displayed the strange energy readings. It's happening again, Scott said, his voice grim. Whatever that thing is, it's back. Professor Xavier's face was etched with worry as he studied the readings. This energy signature is even stronger than before. We must be prepared for anything. Naruto felt a sense of dread wash over him. He had known that the void was just the beginning, but seeing the scale of the threat they were facing made it all too real. As the X-Men prepared for battle once again, Naruto found himself standing beside Jean, Rogue, and Kitty. The bond he had formed with them over the past few weeks had only grown stronger, and he knew that whatever happened next, they would face it together. We'll stop this thing, whatever it is, Naruto said, his voice filled with determination. We have to. Jean nodded, her expression resolute. We will. But we need to be ready for anything. This isn't just about our world anymore, whatever this is, it's affecting both of our realities. Kitty's usual light-hearted demeanor was replaced with seriousness as she phased through her uniform, ready for action. We've got your back, Naruto. We're in this together. Rogue gave Naruto a small, encouraging smile, and he felt his resolve strengthen. They had already faced the void once and survived. They could do it again. But as they prepared to head out, Professor Xavier's voice stopped them. Wait, he said, his tone urgent. This energy, it's not just coming from the same source. There are multiple signatures, multiple voids. And they're converging. Naruto's blood ran cold as the realization hit him. The void wasn't just one entity, it was a force, spreading and multiplying across dimensions. And now, it was coming for them all. The X-Men looked at each other, their expressions mirroring the gravity of the situation. This was no longer just a battle to protect their world, it was a fight for the survival of every reality. As they set out into the night, Naruto felt a surge of determination unlike anything he had ever felt before. He had faced impossible odds before and come out on top. He would do it again. Not just for his world, but for this one and for the people he had come to care about so deeply. A storm was coming, and Naruto knew that they would have to fight with everything they had. But no matter what, he wouldn't let the darkness win. The night sky was ablaze with swirling lights and energy as the X-Men and Naruto rushed towards the source of the disturbance. The air crackled with electricity, and the ground beneath them trembled with the force of the approaching threat. As they neared the epicenter, they could see multiple rifts in the fabric of reality, portals to other dimensions, each one pulsating with dark energy. Naruto's heart pounded in his chest as he scanned the area. The sheer scale of the energy emanating from the rifts was overwhelming. He could feel the presence of the voids, their malevolent power seeping into every corner of the battlefield. This is bad, Scott muttered, his visor glowing as he prepared for whatever was coming. We've never faced anything like this before. Stay focused, everyone, Professor Xavier's voice came through their communicators, calm yet urgent. Our priority is to contain the rifts and prevent the voids from crossing over into our world. Naruto, you're our key to stopping this. We need your help. Naruto nodded, his determination solidifying. I'll do whatever it takes. Jean, Rogue, and Kitty stood by his side, their expressions resolute. They had faced many challenges together, but this was different. This was a battle that could decide the fate of multiple worlds. As they approached the largest rift, a figure emerged from the swirling energy, a twisted version of Naruto himself, formed from the dark energy of the void. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and its presence sent a chill down Naruto's spine. "Is that me?" Naruto whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "No," Jean said firmly, her telepathic powers allowing her to sense the truth. "It's not you. It's a manifestation of the void, taking your form to weaken you." The dark Naruto smirked, its voice dripping with malice. "You think you can stop me? You're nothing compared to the power of the void. I am everything you fear, everything you could never be." Naruto gritted his teeth, refusing to let the creature's words shake him. He had faced his own darkness before, he wouldn't let it consume him now. "We'll take it down together," Rogue said, her fists clenched. "You don't have to do this alone." Kitty phased through the ground, reappearing behind the dark Naruto. "Yeah, and we're not about to let some creepy doppelganger mess with our friend." Jean's eyes glowed with a fiery light as she prepared to unleash her powers. "Let's end this." The battle began with a fury, the X-Men working in perfect sync as they attacked the dark Naruto from all sides. Scott's optic blasts, Kitty's phasing strikes, Rogue's superhuman strength, and Jean's telekinetic powers, all of it was focused on taking down the twisted version of Naruto. But the dark Naruto was relentless, matching their every move with a sinister smile. It seemed to grow stronger with each attack, feeding off the void's energy. As the battle raged on, it became clear that brute force alone wouldn't be enough to defeat it. Naruto knew that he had to find a way to disrupt the connection between the dark Naruto and the void. He focused his chakra, drawing on the power of the 9 tails within him. He could feel the connection between the rifts and the dark energy, they were all linked, part of the same destructive force. "Everyone, keep it busy," Naruto shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "I'm going to try something." The X-Men nodded, continuing their assault with renewed vigor. As they kept the dark Naruto occupied, Naruto concentrated on the rifts. He reached out with his chakra, trying to sense the flow of energy between them. He could feel it, the dark energy coursing through the rifts like a network, feeding the voids and allowing them to spread. If he could sever that connection, he might be able to stop the voids from crossing over. "Here goes nothing," Naruto muttered to himself as he formed a Rasengan in his hand. But this time, he infused it with not just his chakra, but with the 9 tails energy as well. The Rasengan glowed with a fierce orange light, crackling with power. With a determined shout, Naruto launched himself at the largest rift, driving the Rasengan into its center. The impact was immediate, the rift shuddered violently, and the dark energy within it began to destabilize. "Now!" Naruto yelled, signaling to the X-Men. Jean unleashed a powerful telekinetic blast, pushing the dark Naruto back towards the rift. Rogue and Kitty followed up with a coordinated attack, forcing it closer to the destabilized portal. As the dark Naruto struggled against the onslaught, the rift began to pull it in, the dark energy swirling around it in a chaotic vortex. "You're not going anywhere," Naruto shouted, his voice filled with resolve as he slammed another Rasengan into the dark Naruto. With a final anguished scream, the dark Naruto was sucked into the rift and the portal collapsed in on itself, sealing shut with a blinding flash of light. The other rifts began to close as well, the dark energy dissipating as the network was severed. Within moments, the battlefield was quiet, the threat seemingly neutralized. The X-Men stood in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. Naruto dropped to one knee, exhausted but relieved. They had done it, they had stopped the void. "Is it over?" Kitty asked, her voice tentative. "For now," Naruto replied, his voice heavy with fatigue. "But something tells me this isn't the last we've seen of the void." Professor Xavier's voice came through their communicators, filled with a mix of relief and caution. "You've done well, all of you. But we must remain vigilant. The void is a powerful force, and it's clear that it has its sights set on both our world and Naruto's." Naruto nodded, feeling the weight of Xavier's words. The void had been a formidable foe, but he knew that they couldn't afford to let their guard down. There were still many questions left unanswered, and the threat was far from over. As they made their way back to the mansion, Naruto found himself walking beside Jean, Rogue, and Kitty. The bond between them had only grown stronger through the battle, and he knew that he could count on them no matter what. "We'll face whatever comes next together," Jean said, her voice filled with determination. "Yeah," Rogue agreed, a small smile on her lips. "We're not going to let some void tear us apart." Kitty grinned, her usual optimism returning. "Bring it on. We've got this." Naruto smiled, feeling a sense of camaraderie and hope. The road ahead was uncertain, but he knew that with his new friends by his side, they could overcome any challenge. As they approached the mansion, Naruto looked up at the sky, where the stars had returned to their rightful place. The storm had passed, but the journey was far from over. And deep down, Naruto knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger adventure, one that would test their strength, their bonds, and their resolve like never before. The aftermath of the battle left the X-Men and Naruto with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The mansion, though a little battered from the earlier tremors, stood as a safe haven once more. As the group returned to the mansion's common area, they were greeted with a rare moment of peace, though the weight of what they had just faced still lingered in the air. Naruto collapsed onto the couch, his body aching from the strain of the fight. Man, that was intense. I've faced some crazy stuff before, but this was on a whole different level. Rogue nodded, leaning against the wall as she crossed her arms. Yeah, that void thing was no joke. But we did it. We beat it. Kitty plopped down next to Naruto, her energy still buzzing. And we made one heck of a team. I mean, did you see how we took that thing down? We were awesome. Jean, who had been quietly observing the group, smiled softly. We did more than just fight well together. We trusted each other. That's what made the difference. Naruto felt a warmth in his chest at Jean's words. He had fought alongside many allies in his life, but the connection he felt with the X-Men was different. They had welcomed him into their world, into their family, without hesitation. And in return, he had found a place where he belonged, even if only temporarily. Thanks, guys, Naruto said, his voice sincere. I know I'm not from around here, but you all treated me like I was one of you. It means a lot. Rogue pushed off from the wall and walked over to Naruto, placing a hand on his shoulder. You're not just one of us, Naruto. You're our friend. And friends stick together, no matter what. Kitty beamed, nodding in agreement. Exactly. And besides, it's not every day we get to hang out with a ninja from another dimension. You're like the coolest person ever. Naruto chuckled, feeling a sense of pride at their words. He glanced over at Jean, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since their return. Her expression was calm, but there was a glint of concern in her eyes. Jean, what's on your mind? Naruto asked, his tone gentle. Jean hesitated for a moment before responding. I was just thinking about what Professor Xavier said about the void not being done with us. This might have been just the beginning. The room fell into a contemplative silence. The battle had been won, but the threat of the void still loomed over them, an ever-present danger that could strike again at any moment. We can't let our guard down, Scott said, stepping forward with his usual leadership. We'll need to be prepared for whatever comes next. And that means training, strategizing, and staying vigilant. Naruto nodded in agreement. I'll do whatever it takes to protect this world and my world from the void. We've got to be ready. Jean's gaze softened as she looked at Naruto. And we will be. Together. The bond between Naruto and the X-Men had grown stronger with each passing day. What had begun as a simple mission to help a stranger had turned into something much more, a partnership, a friendship, and perhaps, for some, something deeper. Over the next few days, life at the mansion returned to a semblance of normalcy. Training sessions resumed, and the team worked tirelessly to improve their skills and coordination. Naruto found himself fully integrated into the X-Men's routine, sparring with Scott, running simulations with Beast, and even taking part in the group's daily activities. But amidst the training and preparation, there were moments of quiet reflection. Naruto often found himself alone with his thoughts, the weight of the recent battle still heavy on his mind. It was during one such moment, late at night, that he found himself on the roof of the mansion, gazing up at the stars. The door to the roof creaked open, and Jean stepped out, joining Naruto without a word. They stood in silence for a while, the cool night air brushing against their skin. You've been quiet lately, Jean finally said, her voice soft. Naruto sighed, leaning on the railing. Just thinking. About everything that's happened. About what's coming next. The void, it feels like something that's not just going to go away. Jean nodded, understanding his concerns. You're right. The void is a threat we can't ignore. But you don't have to face it alone. We're here with you, Naruto. All of us. I know, Naruto replied, his voice filled with gratitude. It's just I've always been the one to protect others, to carry the burden on my own. But now, being here with all of you, it's different. I don't have to do it alone. And that's kind of scary. Jean turned to face him, her expression gentle. It's okay to rely on others. To let them help you carry the weight. You don't always have to be the hero by yourself. Naruto looked into Jean's eyes, finding comfort in her words. I guess I'm still getting used to that. But I'm glad I have you guys. Jean smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of the stars above. We're glad to have you too, Naruto. As the night continued, the two of them talked, sharing their hopes and fears for the future. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a bond that went beyond words. And as the night grew colder, they found warmth in each other's presence. The threat of the void still loomed, but for now, there was peace. A peace that came from knowing they weren't alone in this fight. And as Naruto looked out at the horizon, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together because the bonds they had forged in battle were stronger than any darkness that might come their way. The peace following the battle with the void was fleeting, as darkness loomed on the horizon. Despite the X-Men's efforts to prepare, there was an unease that settled over the mansion like a shroud. Nightmares plagued the residents, particularly Rogue, Jean, and Kitty, who found themselves revisiting painful memories from their pasts. Naruto noticed the change in the atmosphere, especially in Rogue. She had always been tough and guarded, but now there was a vulnerability to her that he hadn't seen before. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple, Naruto found Rogue sitting alone in the mansion's garden, staring off into the distance. "Mind if I join you?" Naruto asked, approaching cautiously. Rogue glanced up at him, her expression weary. "Sure, could use the company." Naruto sat beside her on the stone bench, letting the silence linger for a moment before speaking. "You've been quieter than usual. Is everything okay?" Rogue sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's just I've been having these dreams. Or maybe memories. I'm not sure. They're from my past, but they feel twisted, like something or someone is trying to mess with my head." Naruto's brow furrowed in concern. "Do you think it's the void? Trying to get into your mind?" Rogue shook her head. "I don't know. But it's bringing up things I thought I'd buried a long time ago." Naruto understood all too well what it was like to be haunted by the past. He reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to face this alone, Rogue. We'll figure it out together." Rogue smiled faintly, appreciating the gesture. "Thanks, Naruto. I guess I'm just not used to letting people in." Naruto chuckled softly. "Neither am I. But being here with all of you, it's teaching me that it's okay to rely on others. We're stronger together." As the night wore on, the two sat in companionable silence, drawing strength from each other's presence. The mansion, though still shrouded in unease, felt a little warmer with their connection. Meanwhile, Jean was in the danger room, running a solo simulation. She had been pushing herself harder than usual, trying to drown out the whispers in her mind. Whispers that weren't her own. The simulation pitted her against a horde of sentinels, towering robots designed to hunt down mutants. But no matter how many she destroyed, they kept coming, relentless in their assault. Sweat dripped down her face as she blasted them with her telekinesis, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Jean, enough." Scott's voice echoed through the danger room, but Jean was too caught up in the battle to hear him. She unleashed a powerful burst of energy, disintegrating the sentinels in a flash of light. The room fell silent as the simulation ended, leaving Jean standing alone in the aftermath. Scott rushed over to her, concern etched on his face. "Jean, you need to take it easy. You're pushing yourself too hard." Jean shook her head, trying to steady her breathing. "I have to be stronger, Scott. If the void comes back, if something worse comes, I need to be ready." Scott placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding her. "You're already strong, Jean. But you don't have to carry this burden alone. We're all in this together." Jean looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity in his words. She knew he was right, but the whispers in her mind were growing louder, feeding on her fear and doubt. She hadn't told anyone, not even Naruto, about the dark presence she felt lurking in the corners of her mind. A presence that had been growing ever since the battle with the void. I just need some time," Jean finally said, pulling away from Scott's touch. "I'll be okay." Scott nodded, though he didn't look entirely convinced. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here. We all are." Jean offered him a small smile before leaving the danger room, her mind still swirling with uncertainty. That night, Jean's sleep was restless. She tossed and turned, trapped in a nightmare that felt all too real. She was standing in a dark, endless void, her surroundings cold and oppressive. In the distance, she saw a figure, a shadowy version of herself, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "You can't escape me, Jean," the shadowy figure whispered, its voice echoing in the darkness. "I am a part of you, and I will consume you." Jean backed away, fear gripping her heart. "No, you're not real. You're just a nightmare." The shadowy figure laughed, the sound chilling her to the bone. "Nightmare? No, Jean. I am your true self. And soon, you will embrace me." Jean's breath caught in her throat as the figure lunged at her, its hands reaching out to engulf her in darkness. She screamed, her mind desperately trying to fight back, but the darkness was too strong. Just as she felt herself being pulled under, a bright light pierced through the void. Jean looked up to see Naruto standing before her, his expression fierce and determined. "Jean, you're stronger than this. Don't let it take control." Naruto shouted, his voice cutting through the darkness. Jean reached out to him, their hands clasping together as a surge of power erupted between them. The darkness recoiled, unable to withstand the combined force of their willpower. With one final burst of light, the shadowy figure was banished, and Jean found herself back in her room, drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. Naruto, who had sensed her distress and entered her mind to help, was by her side in an instant. "Are you okay?" Jean nodded weakly, still shaken from the experience. It was the void. Or something connected to it. "It's trying to take control of me." Naruto's expression hardened. "We won't let it. Whatever this thing is, we'll fight it together." Jean looked up at him, her fear slowly being replaced by a steely resolve. Thank you, Naruto. I don't know what I would have done without you. Naruto smiled gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You're stronger than you think, Jean. And you're not alone in this. As the night wore on, Jean found solace in Naruto's presence, knowing that she had a powerful ally by her side. The darkness was still there, lurking in the corners of her mind, but with Naruto's support, she knew she could face it. The shadows of the past were not easily banished, but with each passing day, the bonds between Naruto and the X-Men grew stronger. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, their determination unyielding in the face of the encroaching darkness. Days passed, but the unease hanging over the Xavier Institute only grew more intense. Naruto, Rogue, Jean, and Kitty could feel it in the air, a tension that was almost palpable. The void may have been defeated, but its remnants still lingered, casting long shadows over the mansion. Professor Xavier called a meeting with the X-Men, gathering them in the mansion's main hall. The room was filled with murmurs as the team assembled, each of them sensing that something significant was about to happen. Xavier, seated in his wheelchair at the center of the room, looked more serious than usual. His brows were furrowed, and there was a heaviness in his eyes that made the group fall silent. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "I've been monitoring the psychic residue left behind by the void, and I'm afraid the situation is more dire than we initially thought." A ripple of concern spread through the room. Scott leaned forward, his expression intense. "What do you mean, Professor?" Xavier took a deep breath. The void was not merely an entity. It was a manifestation of something far more ancient and malevolent, a force that feeds on fear, despair, and anger. While we managed to defeat the void, we've only delayed the inevitable. This force, whatever it is still out there, growing stronger. Naruto clenched his fists, a sense of dread creeping into his heart. "So, what's our plan? How do we stop it for good?" Xavier's gaze swept over the team, his expression grim. "We must prepare for its return. But this time, it won't just be targeting one of us. It will seek to destroy everyone. It's an ancient evil that has existed for millennia, and it's now set its sights on us." Jean's eyes widened in realization. "That's what's been haunting my dreams, it's been trying to get inside my mind." Xavier nodded. "Yes, Jean. It's been attempting to exploit your fears, just as it has with Rogue and Kitty. This force is cunning, and it knows that breaking us from within is the key to its victory." Rogue's hands tightened around the armrests of her chair. "So what do? We can't just sit around waiting for it to strike." Xavier's expression softened slightly. "We must strengthen our bonds, trust in each other, and stand united. This entity thrives on division and isolation. If we stand together, we may have a chance to withstand its onslaught." Naruto's resolve hardened. "We've faced worse odds before. We can do this. We'll protect each other, no matter what." Scott stepped forward, his voice filled with determination. "Agreed. We've trained for this. We'll be ready." The rest of the X-Men voiced their agreement, their resolve solidifying. The mansion might have been shrouded in shadows, but their unity was a beacon of light that refused to be extinguished. Later that evening, Naruto found himself training in the danger room, his mind focused on honing his skills. The weight of the upcoming battle pressed heavily on his shoulders, but he knew he couldn't afford to falter. The simulations pushed him to his limits, each challenge designed to test his strength, agility, and resolve. But despite the intensity of the training, Naruto's thoughts kept drifting back to Rogue, Jean, and Kitty. They were more than just teammates to him, they were his friends, and in Rogue's case, something more. He couldn't shake the worry that this ancient evil would use their deepest fears against them. As he unleashed a Rasengan to destroy a simulated enemy, the room's doors slid open, and Kitty walked in. She looked determined, but there was a hint of anxiety in her eyes. "Hey, Naruto," Kitty greeted, phasing through a section of the wall to reach him. "Mind if I join you?" Naruto smiled, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Not at all. The more, the merrier." Kitty stepped onto the training platform, activating a series of holographic enemies. She moved with precision, phasing through attacks and countering with agility. Naruto watched her for a moment, impressed by her skill. "Kitty, you've really gotten stronger," Naruto remarked as they fought side by side. Kitty grinned, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "Thanks, but I still feel like I'm not doing enough. Like, no matter how much I train, I won't be able to protect everyone when the time comes." Naruto stopped mid-fight, turning to face her. "Kitty, you're one of the strongest people I know. It's not just about physical strength, it's about heart. You care about everyone here, and that's what makes you powerful." Kitty blushed slightly, touched by his words. "Thanks, Naruto. I don't want to let anyone down." Naruto placed a hand on her shoulder, giving her a reassuring smile. "You won't. We're all in this together, and we'll face whatever comes as a team. No one's going to be left behind." Kitty nodded, her resolve strengthening. "You're right. We've got each other's backs." As they continued their training, a sense of camaraderie grew between them, further solidifying the bonds that would be crucial in the battles to come. Meanwhile, in another part of the mansion, Rogue sat in her room, staring out the window at the darkening sky. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike. The memories that had resurfaced were like poison, seeping into her thoughts and sapping her strength. She jumped slightly when she heard a knock on her door. "Come in," she called out, trying to steady her voice. Jean entered, her expression filled with understanding. "Hey Rogue. Mind if we talk?" Rogue nodded, grateful for the company. "Sure, Jean. What's on your mind?" Jean took a seat on the edge of the bed, her gaze serious. "I've been feeling it too, the darkness. It's like it's trying to take control, to make us doubt ourselves. But we can't let it win." Rogue sighed, her voice tinged with frustration. "Ah no, but it's hard. I've always had these powers that make me feel like I'm cursed, like I'm not meant to be close to anyone. And now this thing is making it worse." Jean reached out, placing a hand on Rogue's. "You're not cursed, Rogue. You're strong, and you've got people who care about you. Naruto here really cares about you." Rogue looked up, surprised by the warmth in Jean's words. "Ah no. He's been the best thing that's ever happened to me. But I'm afraid I'll hurt him." Jean squeezed Rogue's hand gently. "You won't. And if this darkness tries to come between you, we'll fight it together. You're not alone in this." Rogue's heart swelled with emotion. For so long, she had been used to keeping people at a distance, afraid of what her powers might do. But now, she realized that she didn't have to face her fears alone. "Thanks, Jean," Rogue said softly. "I needed to hear that." Jean smiled, her eyes filled with determination. "We'll get through this, Rogue. All of us. And when that darkness comes, we'll be ready." As the night drew to a close, the bonds between the X-Men were stronger than ever. The storm on the horizon was growing, but so was their resolve to face it. United, they would stand against the gathering darkness, prepared to protect each other and the world they called home. The following days were marked by an uneasy calm at the Xavier Institute. The tension among the X-Men was palpable, as if the mansion itself was holding its breath, waiting for the storm to break. Naruto, Rogue, Jean, and Kitty all threw themselves into training, but there was a sense of inevitability that lingered over them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the grounds, Naruto found himself wandering through the mansion's vast halls. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that something was watching them from the darkness. As he passed by the large windows that overlooked the mansion's expansive garden, he heard a faint voice, a whisper carried on the wind. It was a voice he hadn't heard in years, one that sent a chill down his spine. "Naruto." He stopped in his tracks, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the empty corridor. The voice was familiar, but it couldn't be, there was no way it was real. "Who's there?" Naruto called out, his voice echoing in the empty hall. He waited, but the only response was the sound of his own breathing. Shaking his head, he continued walking, trying to dismiss the voice as just his imagination. But deep down, he knew better. The voice belonged to someone from his past, someone he had thought long gone. Elsewhere in the mansion, Rogue was in the library, flipping through an old book that she had found on the ancient lore of the world. She had been trying to learn more about the entity that had been haunting them, hoping to find some clue about how to stop it. But as she read, her mind kept drifting back to the memories that the void had unearthed. The pain, the loss, it was all too real, too raw. She had tried to bury those memories, to forget them, but the darkness had a way of dredging them back up. Suddenly, she felt a presence behind her, a cold shiver running down her spine. She turned around quickly, but the library was empty. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. For a moment, there was silence. Then, from the shadows, a figure stepped forward, a figure Rogue knew all too well. It was her mother, Mystique. "Mama," Rogue whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mystique was standing before her, looking exactly as she had the last time Rogue had seen her. "Hello, Anna," Mystique said, her voice smooth and cold. "It's been a long time." Rogue's heart pounded in her chest. "This isn't real. You're not real." Mystique tilted her head, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "Are you sure? After all, I'm just a part of you. I'm the one who made you what you are, Anna. You can never escape me." Rogue backed away, her mind reeling. This was another trick, another manifestation of the darkness trying to get inside her head. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the vision, but when she opened them again, Mystique was still there. "Why are you doing this?" Rogue demanded, her voice shaking with anger. "Why now?" Mystique's smile faded, replaced by an expression of cold indifference. "Because you're weak, Anna. You've always been weak. And now, you're letting these people make you even weaker. They don't care about you. They're just using you, just like I did." Rogue clenched her fists, anger boiling within her. "That's not true. They're my friends, my family. They care about me more than you ever did." Mystique's eyes glinted with malice. Family. Friends. You don't belong with them, Anna. You're not like them. You're a monster, just like me. Rogue felt her resolve waver, the darkness seeping into her heart. But then she thought of Naruto, of Jean, Kitty, and the rest of the X-Men. They had shown her what it meant to belong, to be loved despite her flaws. No, Rogue said firmly, stepping forward, her voice filled with determination. You're wrong. I'm not like you. I'm stronger than you. Mystique sneered, but before she could say another word, she began to fade, her form dissolving into shadows. Remember, Anna, Mystique's voice echoed as she disappeared. You can never escape what you are. Rogue stood alone in the library, her breathing heavy. The darkness had tried to break her, to pull her back into the shadows of her past, but she refused to let it win. She was stronger than that. Stronger than the darkness, stronger than her fears. And she wasn't alone. Meanwhile, Naruto had made his way to the mansion's garden, the cold night air helping to clear his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, something waiting to strike. As he walked among the trees, he suddenly felt a presence of powerful, malevolent force that made his skin crawl. He turned around, his eyes narrowing as he sensed the darkness coalescing in front of him. A figure began to materialize, emerging from the shadows, a figure that looked exactly like him. Naruto's eyes widened as he stared at his doppelganger. It was like looking into a twisted mirror. His clone wore the same clothes, had the same face, but there was something off about it. Its eyes were cold, empty, devoid of any warmth or life. What are you?" Naruto demanded, his voice low and tense. The doppelganger smirked, its expression cruel and mocking. "I'm you, Naruto. I'm the part of you that you've tried to keep hidden. The darkness that you refuse to acknowledge." Naruto clenched his fists, his heart pounding in his chest. "You're not me. I won't let you control me." The doppelganger chuckled, a sound that sent chills down Naruto's spine. "Control you? I am you, Naruto. The part that craves power, that fears losing those you care about. The part that's willing to do anything, sacrifice anyone to protect them." Naruto's mind raced, the doppelganger's words hitting too close to home. He had always struggled with the fear of losing those he loved, of not being strong enough to protect them. But he knew he couldn't let that fear control him. "I'm not afraid of you," Naruto said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "I've faced worse than you, and I've come out stronger. You're just a shadow, a memory of a fear that I've already conquered." The doppelganger's smirk faded, replaced by an expression of cold rage. "We'll see about that, Naruto. The darkness is coming, and when it does, you'll have to face me again. And next time, you won't be so lucky." With those words, the doppelganger dissolved into shadows, leaving Naruto standing alone in the garden, his heart still racing. He knew that the darkness was far from defeated, that it was only growing stronger. But he also knew that he wasn't alone in this fight. He had Rogue, Jean, Kitty, and the rest of the X-Men by his side. Together, they would face the coming storm, no matter how dark it might be. As Naruto turned to head back to the mansion, he felt a renewed sense of determination. The darkness might be powerful, but it wasn't invincible. And as long as they stood together, they had a fighting chance. The shadows of the past might linger, but they wouldn't define him. He was Naruto Uzumaki, and he would protect those he loved no matter what. The days continued to blur into a relentless march toward an inevitable confrontation. The Xavier Institute was a hive of activity, as every X-Men member prepared for the darkness they knew was coming. Naruto, Rogue, Jean, and Kitty worked tirelessly, honing their skills and bolstering their defenses, but there was an ever-present undercurrent of anxiety. One morning, as the sun rose over the mansion's sprawling grounds, the mood was somber. Professor Xavier had gathered the team in the common room, his face etched with concern. The group was quiet, the weight of the impending battle heavy on their shoulders. "I've been monitoring the psychic frequencies," Xavier began, his voice grave. "The darkness is growing stronger. It's begun to consolidate its power, and it's only a matter of time before it launches its final assault." Scott nodded, his expression resolute. "We're ready. We've trained for this." Xavier's gaze turned to Naruto, Rogue, Jean, and Kitty. "But it's not just physical strength we need. The darkness seeks to exploit our fears, to divide us. We must remain united, both in battle and in spirit." Jean stepped forward, her eyes steady. "We understand, Professor. We'll face it together." Xavier nodded, a hint of relief in his eyes. "Good. There's one more thing you should know. I've received a vision of the darkness's stronghold, a place where it's drawing its power. If we can strike there, we might be able to weaken it enough to make a difference." Naruto's eyes narrowed. "Where is this stronghold?" Xavier's expression was pained. "It's in an old, abandoned facility outside of New York City. It was once a secret government research site, now it's become a focal point for the darkness." Rogue's eyes hardened with determination. "Then that's where we'll go. We'll take the fight to it." As the meeting concluded, the team made their preparations. The X-Men gathered their gear, their resolve strengthening with each passing moment. Naruto, Rogue, Jean, and Kitty knew this would be their most challenging battle yet, but they were prepared to face it head-on. The abandoned facility loomed on the outskirts of New York City, a dark and foreboding structure surrounded by overgrown weeds and rusted fences. The building was a relic of a bygone era, its windows boarded up and its walls cracked and peeling. As Naruto, Rogue, Jean, and Kitty approached the facility, the air felt heavy, charged with an oppressive energy. The ground seemed to pulse with malevolent force, and the sky above was a dark roiling mass of clouds. They entered the facility, their steps echoing through the desolate halls. The interior was a maze of dark corridors and dimly lit rooms, each one filled with the remnants of long-abandoned experiments and equipment. The air was thick with dust and decay, and the darkness seemed to seep from every corner. "This place gives me the creeps," Kitty muttered, her eyes scanning the surroundings warily. Jean nodded in agreement, her telepathic senses on high alert. "The darkness is strong here. We need to be careful." Naruto led the way, his senses sharp and his instincts on edge. As they moved deeper into the facility, they began to feel the presence of the darkness more acutely. It was like a cold, suffocating fog that pressed in on them from all sides. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and a deep rumbling sound echoed through the facility. The team stopped in their tracks, their eyes wide with alarm. "What was that?" Rogue asked, her voice tense. Before anyone could respond, a series of powerful, dark energy blasts erupted from the shadows, crashing into the walls and floors around them. The team sprang into action, using their powers to defend themselves. Naruto summoned his shadow clones, creating a small army to help fend off the attacks. Rogue used her absorption powers to shield herself and the others, while Kitty phased through the attacks to strike back from different angles. Jean unleashed powerful telekinetic blasts, pushing back against the darkness. Despite their efforts, the attacks were relentless. The darkness seemed to be everywhere, a swirling mass of malevolent energy that sought to overwhelm them. "Stay focused," Naruto shouted, his voice carrying over the din of battle. "We need to find the source of this." They pressed on, moving through the facility with grim determination. The deeper they went, the more intense the darkness became. It was as if the very walls of the facility were alive with a dark force, twisting and contorting to hinder their progress. Finally, they reached a large chamber at the heart of the facility. The room was filled with dark energy, and at its center was a massive pulsating orb of darkness, a swirling vortex that seemed to draw power from the very fabric of reality. "That's it," Jean said, her voice filled with awe and fear. "That's the source." Naruto's eyes narrowed as he took in the sight. "We need to destroy it. That's the only way to weaken the darkness." Rogue, Jean, and Kitty nodded in agreement. They positioned themselves around the orb, preparing to launch their combined attack. Naruto took a deep breath, focusing his chakra. He formed a massive Rasengan, the energy crackling with power. "Ready." Jean and Kitty combined their telekinetic and phasing abilities to create a powerful beam of energy, while Rogue channeled her own strength into the attack. The combined force of their powers struck the orb, causing it to flare brightly with a blinding light. The darkness roared in anger, its form writhing and contorting as the attack hit its core. But even as the orb began to crack and shatter, the darkness fought back with a ferocious intensity. The room shook violently, and dark tendrils lashed out, trying to drag the team into the abyss. "Hold on," Naruto shouted, his voice filled with determination. "We're almost there." But the final surge of energy, the orb exploded in a blinding flash of light. The darkness that had enveloped the facility began to dissipate, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as the malevolent force was driven back. The team staggered, their bodies exhausted from the battle. They looked round the chamber, seeing the remnants of the shattered orb and the fading traces of darkness. "It's over," Jean said, her voice trembling. "We did it." Naruto nodded, his eyes weary but resolute. "We've weakened the darkness, but it's not gone for good. We need to stay vigilant." As they made their way out of the facility, the dawn began to break over the horizon. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the clouds, casting a hopeful glow over the desolate landscape. The battle was far from over, but the team had taken a significant step toward defeating the darkness. They knew that the final confrontation was still to come, but for now, they could take solace in their victory. Together, they walked back to the mansion, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. The fight was not yet over, but they would face it with unwavering resolve, knowing that they had each other to rely on. Back at the mansion, the team was greeted with relief and celebration. The victory had lifted their spirits, and they were ready to continue their fight against the darkness. Naruto, Rogue, Jean, and Kitty stood together, their bond stronger than ever. They knew that the final battle was still ahead, but they were prepared to face it with courage and unity. As the sun set over the mansion, casting long shadows across the grounds, they looked out at the horizon, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The darkness might be powerful, but they had the strength of their friendship and the courage to stand against it. The dawn of a new battle was approaching, but they were ready to face it together, determined to protect the world they cherished and the bonds that had become their greatest strength. The days that followed were marked by a tense anticipation. The team knew that their victory over the darkness's stronghold was only a temporary reprieve. The malevolent force had been weakened but was not vanquished. Its shadows still loomed, threatening to consume everything they held dear. Naruto, Rogue, Jean, and Kitty spent their time preparing for the final battle, knowing that the true test was yet to come. They trained rigorously, pushing their limits and sharpening their skills. The sense of unity among them had never been stronger, but so had their anxiety. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the mansion, Professor Xavier called the team together in the common room. "We've gathered all the information we can," Xavier began, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "The darkness is consolidating its power in a location deep within the heart of the city. It's preparing for a final push." Scott leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Where exactly is it?" "The energy readings point to an old underground facility beneath the city," Xavier replied. "It's a place that was once used for experimental purposes. The darkness has taken it over and turned it into its new base of operations." Rogue frowned, her expression determined. "Then that's where we need to go. We can't let it gain any more power." Xavier nodded. "I agree. We need to strike before it becomes too powerful. But be aware this will be the most dangerous mission we've faced. The darkness will be expecting us, and it will fight with everything it has." Naruto stepped forward, his eyes resolute. "We're ready. We've faced this darkness before, and we won't back down now." Jean, Kitty, and Rogue nodded in agreement. They were prepared to face the ultimate challenge, no matter the cost. The team assembled in the mansion's hangar, where the Blackbird awaited. It was their only means of quickly reaching the underground facility and launching their final assault. The aircraft was prepped and ready, its engines humming with anticipation. As they boarded the Blackbird, Naruto took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the impending battle settle over him. He glanced at Rogue, Jean, and Kitty, their faces reflecting a mixture of determination and apprehension. "Let's do this," Naruto said, giving them a reassuring smile. With a roar, the Blackbird lifted off, soaring through the night sky toward the heart of the city. The journey was silent, each member of the team lost in their own thoughts as they prepared for what lay ahead. The Blackbird descended into the city, navigating through the labyrinth of streets and buildings until it reached the entrance to the underground facility. The team disembarked, their steps echoing in the dimly lit corridor that led to the facility's depths. As they ventured deeper, the darkness grew more oppressive, the air thick with malevolent energy. The facility was a maze of darkened halls and twisted passages, its walls lined with remnants of forgotten experiments and shattered equipment. The team moved with purpose, their senses alert for any signs of the darkness's presence. They could feel its power intensifying as they approached the core of the facility. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to tremble, and a deep rumbling sound filled the air. The walls of the facility shifted and warped, creating a chaotic and disorienting environment. "It's trying to throw us off balance," Jean shouted, her telekinetic abilities struggling to maintain control over the shifting surroundings. "Stay focused," Naruto called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to keep moving." The team pressed forward, using their powers to navigate the treacherous terrain. Rogue's absorption abilities provided them with protection, while Kitty phased through obstacles and Jean used her telekinesis to clear a path. Naruto's shadow clones helped to scout ahead and deflect attacks from the darkness. As they reached the core of the facility, they came upon a vast chamber bathed in eerie pulsating light. At its center was a massive pulsating orb of darkness, the source of the malevolent energy. The darkness roared in fury as the team entered the chamber, its form writhing and shifting in response to their presence. Dark tendrils lashed out, trying to ensnare them and drag them into the abyss. "Prepare yourselves," Naruto shouted, forming a massive Rasengan in his hand. "We're going in." Jean and Kitty combined their powers, creating a powerful shield to protect the team from the darkness's attacks. Rogue channeled her strength into their offensive, while Naruto's shadow clones launched a coordinated assault against the orb. The chamber was filled with the blinding light of their combined attack as they struck the orb with all their might. The darkness roared in anger, its form destabilizing as the attack tore through its core. But even as the orb began to crack and shatter, the darkness fought back with a ferocity that shook the facility. Dark tendrils lashed out, trying to drag the team into the void. The team was pushed to their limits, their powers straining against the overwhelming force. "We need to finish this," Naruto shouted, his voice filled with determination. "We can't let it recover." With a final desperate surge of energy, the team launched their most powerful attack. The orb exploded in a blinding flash of light, and the darkness was driven back with a deafening roar. The chamber was engulfed in a blinding light as the darkness was consumed by the explosion. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the facility began to crumble as the darkness's hold on it was shattered. As the light faded, the team stood amidst the debris, their bodies exhausted but victorious. The oppressive energy had dissipated, leaving the facility in ruins. "It's over," Jean said, her voice trembling with relief. "We did it." Naruto nodded, his eyes weary but resolute. "We've defeated the darkness. But we need to stay vigilant. There's always a chance it could return." The team made their way out of the facility, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. They knew that the fight was not truly over, but they had taken a significant step toward securing their world. As they returned to the mansion, the first rays of dawn began to break through the clouds, casting a hopeful light over the horizon. The battle had been hard fought, but they had triumphed together. Back at the mansion, the team was met with cheers and celebrations. The X-Men and the mansion's staff gathered to congratulate them on their victory. The atmosphere was filled with relief and joy as they celebrated the end of a long and difficult struggle. Naruto, Rogue, Jean, and Kitty stood together, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced the darkness and come out victorious, their unity and determination carrying them through the toughest challenge they had ever faced. As the sun set over the mansion, casting a warm glow over the grounds, the team looked out at the horizon, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The darkness might have been defeated, but the world was always in need of heroes willing to stand against the shadows. Together, they were ready to face whatever came next, their hearts united in their shared commitment to protect their world and each other. The dawn of a new chapter was upon them, and they were prepared to meet it with courage and hope. The mansion was abuzz with activity as the X-Men and their allies prepared for the aftermath of their battle. The sun had fully risen, casting a golden light over the mansion and signaling a new era. Despite their exhaustion, the team felt a profound sense of accomplishment and hope. Naruto, Rogue, Jean, and Kitty gathered in the mansion's library, where they could reflect on their victory and discuss their plans for the future. The room was quiet, the only sounds being the rustling of pages and the soft hum of the mansion's systems. Jean looked at the others with a thoughtful expression. "We've accomplished something incredible, but there's still a lot to do. We need to ensure that the darkness doesn't find a way to return." Kitty nodded, her eyes determined. "We'll stay vigilant. And we'll continue to train and prepare for any threats that come our way." Rogue glanced at Naruto, her expression softening. "You've been incredible through all of this. I don't think we could have done it without you." Naruto smiled, his eyes reflecting the warmth of his feelings. "We did it together. That's what makes us strong." Professor Xavier entered the library, his presence calm and reassuring. "I've been reflecting on our recent battle. We've not only defeated a formidable foe, but also grown stronger as individuals and as a team." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the group. "The darkness may have been vanquished, but the world is still full of challenges and mysteries. It's important that we continue to work together and support each other." Naruto stood up, a resolute look in his eyes. "I'm ready to face whatever comes next. We've proven that we can overcome anything when we stand united." Xavier smiled. "I'm glad to hear that. The X-Men will always be here to support you. And I believe that together, we can make a difference in the world." As the day wore on, the mansion became a place of celebration and renewal. The team members shared stories, laughter, and plans for the future. The victory over the darkness had brought them closer together, strengthening their bonds and reaffirming their commitment to their mission. Rogue and Naruto took a quiet walk through the mansion's gardens, the peaceful surroundings offering a welcome contrast to the chaos of the previous days. The sun's rays filtered through the trees, casting a serene light over the garden. "You know," Rogue said, her voice soft, "I've been thinking about everything that's happened. We've faced so much together, and I'm grateful for your support." Naruto looked at her, his expression sincere. "I feel the same way. We've been through a lot, and I'm glad to have you by my side." Rogue smiled, her eyes reflecting a mix of affection and determination. "We've got a future ahead of us, and I'm ready to face it with you." As they walked hand in hand, the bond between them deepened, a testament to the strength of their relationship and their shared experiences. Meanwhile, Jean and Kitty stood on the mansion's balcony, overlooking the grounds. The sky was clear, and the world seemed full of possibilities. Jean turned to Kitty, a thoughtful expression on her face. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Kitty nodded, her eyes filled with a sense of accomplishment. "Yes, we have. And we've got a lot more to achieve. The world needs heroes, and we're ready to be those heroes." Jean smiled, her confidence unwavering. "Together, we can accomplish anything." As the day turned to evening, the mansion was filled with the sounds of celebration and camaraderie. The team had faced an immense challenge and emerged victorious, but they knew that their journey was far from over. The darkness might have been defeated, but there would always be new challenges and adventures on the horizon. The X-Men, along with their new allies, were prepared to face whatever came their way, knowing that their strength lay in their unity and their unwavering resolve. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Naruto, Rogue, Jean, and Kitty looked out over the mansion grounds, ready to embrace the future with hope and determination. They had forged unbreakable bonds through their trials, and they were prepared to face any new challenges that might come their way. The dawn of a new era had arrived, and with it, a renewed sense of purpose and hope. The world was full of possibilities, and the team was ready to meet them head-on, their hearts united in their shared mission to protect and serve. Together, they would face whatever the future held, knowing that they had each other to rely on. The darkness might have been a formidable adversary, but their strength, courage, and unity had proven to be even greater. And with that, they embraced the promise of new beginnings and the adventures that awaited them in the days to come. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.